So in today's video, I'm going to share some slightly heretical opinions, and that is that in 2025, the whole analog versus digital debate, whether it's with guitar gear, whether it's with audio gear, is obsolete and unimportant. And basically the crux of my argument here would be that in 2025, again, digital modeling is so freaking good that if you were just listening to it, whether it was digital or analog would be frankly purely luck in a guess. If you were listening to some cheaper kind of examples, maybe you'd be able to discern a difference. But again, I actually use a very budget amp modeler. I use the Hot Tone Ampero Mini, which is about, I don't know, like $200 US, maybe 250. And it's really not expensive and it sounds great. I get people at every gig who come up and ask me what I'm using and then are quite disappointed to learn that it's a cheap amp modeler running into just a PA monitor. Because not very recently, but I have slowly replaced all of my analog gear pretty much with digital. I don't own an amp anymore, a real amp, because bringing that in my case and then a really, really light 8-inch PA wedge is lighter and easier to bring on transport and through the Montreal snow than it is bringing a big, heavy, 20 to 30 pound Fender amp. So the sound difference is really not a factor anymore, I would say. And the one bit that I will say to this is that you can feel a bit of a difference when you play it. To me, digital stuff responds much faster than the analog stuff does. So like if you were playing through a Fender tube amp, it feels maybe a little bit more organic and kind of natural if that's what you're used to, whereas digital stuff responds kind of like that because, again, it's much faster, obviously, than the old analog kind of stuff. So there is this feel that you can get when you play it. So I do empathize with people who say that it feels different playing through whatever. But again, I think the pros outweigh the cons of using digital stuff, because the biggest thing that convinced me to make the switch is I thought, well, I can get the exact same sound in every single room that I play in. And it's just this predictable, safe thing when I'm on tour or if I'm playing in a crappy dive bar, I can get exactly the sound that I'm after. Obviously, sometimes you might have to tweak the highs and the lows depending on the room. You might have to add a high cut, a low cut, depending on where you're at. I remember there's one particular venue that has a big wooden stage that was very, very boomy, and I had to dial out a lot of bass to kind of fix that. But again, in terms of having a baseline repeatable sound, it's very important. Now, the second part of my argument is that as a professional working musician and as someone who does this for a living, the most important thing to me by far is getting the effect done. And as I said before, the sound, like tape emulators and all of this stuff, whether you're recording or whether you're mimicking tube amps with a pedal like I am, I think, again, that the most important part is just getting it done. And if something gets the job done in everything but the tactile feel of what you're, like obviously, recording into a MacBook is going to be different than recording onto actual tape. But I would actually argue that digital stuff is way more convenient. Like again, if you compared a tube amp versus, and let me just see if I can unplug this without ruining everything. This is my Fender Princeton. It weighs about a pound. It's tiny. It fits in my case. It is so much more convenient than bringing a tube amp. And then I do have a little wedge over here that weighs about 7 pounds. So I have chopped down in size and scale, and again, it's repeatable. It sounds great in every room, and it is, again, like the convenience factor of digital, I don't think can be overlooked. And again, for me, most of us professional musicians, I do make a good living, but I am by no means living in a huge mansion with a huge I'm miles away from Joe Bonamassa in terms of space and availability to have all of these tube amps and all of these big expensive things that take up space. So the fact that I can have everything in this little part of my home where I record videos is probably about 6 feet by 4 feet kind of thing. And within this, I have every tube amp I could ever want. I have recording interfaces and everything that I can do. And then in Logic, I have tape emulators. I have all of these different things rather than tons and tons of outboard gear. And I do get to the analog people out there who are thinking this guy's an asshole and wrong. To those people, I do get the appeal of having a bunch of real physical things that you can tweak. But again, in terms of actual imports, and if you have the space and the money to have a crap ton of outboard rack gear and it really inspires you and you like having physical things to tweak, by all means, that's a fantastic thing to have. But I don't think your stuff is better because you use analog gear. I think you can get, again, A/B exactly the same result. If you got either of them right, it would be purely luck. But you can get all of the stuff in Logic Pro or Pro Tools or whatever it is with plugins. And I love the fact that we live in the digital world and all of these tools can be available in small, convenient packages and they don't cost a bajillion dollars. So that's another huge kind of thing where, as an artist, again, my biggest priority is getting the thing done. And digital stuff lets me get the thing done, in most cases, faster, cheaper, and just as well as the analog gear would. So that's my kind of second argument to make here. My third thing that I'm going to throw the bone to the analog people here is that if you really want analog stuff, of course that's fine, but don't kid yourself that it's way, way, way better than anything digital that's coming out. I'm happy to admit, again, I'm old enough to remember, the Line 6 Bean Pod. And while those tools, those early digital modelers, were not as good as tube amps, in the modern era, from purely a sound perspective, again, playing through things, you get a little bit of a different feel. And full disclosure, if money was no object, and money and space was no object, I would 100% have a little Princeton reverb or something that just hangs out at home and I play through sometimes. But unfortunately, it's 2025 and I'm a working musician, so money and space is a concern for me. So I don't have that. And I'm so happy with the digital stuff. I don't feel like I'm losing anything. I feel like, if anything, my workflow is actually much more pleasant and better because I take advantage of the digital tools, and the sounds that I get are exactly the same as what I would get if I was miking a real amp every time I recorded audio for a video, or every time I recorded, me playing through a jazz standard. So again, analog gear can be inspiring. It's cool. Don't get me wrong. I do think that having a blackface Fender amp is infinitely cooler and has more mojo than, this little box that kind of looks like an iPad mixed with, a MacBook kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, I would agree. It is cooler. It's great to look at. It's great to have, but it's not essential. And especially nowadays, it's not inherently better anymore. The same kind of argument I would say applies to like vinyl versus CDs or streaming. Well, okay, streaming, you might get worse audio quality for sure because you're listening to MP3 files, but I collect vinyl predominantly just because I love the big thing and I love the experience of listening to a record. But all of the people who say that it's higher fidelity, you get better sound, are full of crap, because all of the frequencies that are cut from CDs are literally cutting out the frequencies that we have been scientifically proven not to hear. Is the sound different between vinyl and CDs? 100%. Is it a world of difference? No. So when you go through and do that kind of thing, it's kind of critical that you acknowledge that the vinyl stuff, again, sounds great, is great, and it's a different sound, but it is not a higher fidelity sound than CDs. CDs are better represented and better. So if it's mixed well on a CD, it's great. I do love the warm sound of vinyl, but CDs technically sound better. They just do. It's better technology. It's better. It's more accurately reproducing things than, a needle physically dragging across the surface of a record could produce. So analog and digital both have a place, but on a purely sound perspective, getting away from vinyl and CDs, because vinyl does sound different than CDs, but going in and doing that kind of stuff with gear, again, I don't think it matters what you use. It's 2025. All of the digital stuff sounds amazing. All of the analog stuff still definitely sounds amazing. And if you're inspired by that workflow and have the money and space to do it, by all means. But for most people, digital is going to be just as good from a sound perspective, and it's going to be way more convenient and intuitive to use, I would argue. Now, the last kind of point that I want to make is that I think a lot of people get into this kind of like weird extremism case where you're either fully analog or you're fully digital. And while my rig is, again, pretty much fully digital, I would say, I have no problem with having some analog gear hanging out around or trying to go in for those things. You don't need to pick both. Again, there's this human tendency to be all in one camp or all in the other. And frankly, actually, I fall prey to this a lot of the time too. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with running, digital pedals in front of a tube amp. Look at all of the players that I love, like Julian Lage, Bill Frisell, Tim Lurch, who are running digital Strymon Flints in front of a blackface Fender. Is that because they like the control that they have over the reverb and the tremolo better than the one on the amp? Again, a lot of these guys will play through the Flint and then into the normal channel. And don't get me wrong, I prefer the normal channel on those Fender blackface amps that have, both options available to you. But again, they're using digital and they're using analog to get the best results. So don't be afraid to mix these things, and don't feel like, because you got some analog preamps that you love or an analog outboard compressor that you love, that you need to replace all of your stuff with it. Let it all kind of coalesce and just use what works, because again, analog stuff does have this inherent cool factor to it where it is cooler than using digital stuff. Don't get me wrong, I like, the look, the tactile feel, and all of these things are better when you use analog stuff. That the experience I get. But when you're actually trying to work on something and get it done and upload it or do whatever you're trying to do with it, the digital stuff is going to be a quicker workflow, it's going to sound just as good, and it's going to do the thing. So when you're kind of looking at this stuff, if you find you're really inspired by it, in particular a tube amp, by all means, get the tube amp and run digital effects in front of it if that works. Don't feel like you need to kind of go into one camp and stick there. You don't have to be tribal about this stuff. It's all good. And again, this kind of gets back to my thing about an artist or being a working musician and an artist, is that I don't care what I use as long as I get the result that I want. The ends justify the means of getting there. And whatever you use, whether it be analog or digital, the goal is just to get good sounds and great sounds and have fun and be inspired and play music. So anyways, if you found this video useful or interesting, I'd really appreciate it if you could like and subscribe. It truly helps me out more than you can know. If you're looking to take a guitar lesson with me, there's a link to get in touch with me down in the description. I'd love to work with you on whatever's troubling you on the guitar. If you're looking for a great way to support me and what I'm up to here on the channel, you can check out my Patreon page, which is also linked down in the description. All of my patrons get early access to videos, as well as cool behind the scenes sneak peeks, stuff that I don't share anywhere else, as well as diagrams and tabs from my videos when I'm uploading a more educational kind of thing than today's, rant. So it's great community, guitar lovers. I'd love to see you over there. Another great way to support me and what I'm up to is to check out my ebooks, or my video courses, which are linked down in the description. Great way to get some more in-depth educational content from me that I can go into in a 10 to 15 minute YouTube video. And last but not least, I have 2 new videos coming out every single week, so I hope I'll see you in the next one. And until I do, I'll wish you a wonderful day, and I hope you have some fun playing the guitar. Thanks.